But today we are back with a stream in English, as you can hear. Welcome all viewers. If I haven't said welcome to you yet, then I welcome you now. Welcome, Ruud. Nice to see you again. And the topic of today is gut and heart intelligences. These are actually pseudoscientific theories about what the neuron cells in our heart and gut are supposed to do. Hi, Lisbeth. And we'll see that is nonsense. All consciousness is produced by the brain inside our head and not by the neurons, the brain cell like. Well, there are cells that are like brain cells in the heart and the gut, and they do not produce consciousness whatsoever. There are a number of reasons, and we'll go to see those reasons in a short moment. But to sum it up before we start, first of all, the most important part is the information integration theory by a neuroscientist, Tononi, excluded. Tononi says there's only consciousness if there's a high level of data integration within a network. That is what we find with the brain inside our head, but we do not find that data integration in our heart or in our gut. So no consciousness there. And we'll see that the people who talk about heart and gut intelligence talk about it as if it's producing consciousness. So that's basically wrong. And they try to come across as scientific, and that makes it pseudoscience. By the way, if you are watching this, when you're viewing this, please, if you have questions. Hi, Veka Simic, good to see you. If you have any questions, any remarks, if you disagree with me, it's possible. In fact, lots of people disagree with me. And I already found out that lots of, even when I have not said anything yet, then people are already upset about the fact that I'm calling this nonsense pseudoscience. So the first reason is Tononi excludes it. There is simply not enough data integration in the heart and the gut. The second reason is that the way our consciousness works, even with stuff that you can easily check with yourself. So if you're watching this, please rub on your hand like this, or you can rub like this. You can even pinch it if you are a daring adventurer. But whatever you do with your hand, you'll feel it in your hand. It's right there. I can feel it here. Here's where I feel it. But in reality, we know, there's something called the rubber hand illusion, that is what you feel in your hand is completely produced in the brain, inside your head, and not in the hand at all. Because if you put a rubber hand and a rubber arm on the table, and you put your real arm and your real hand below the table, and you rub them at the same time, you actually feel what you're feeling inside the rubber hand and not in your real hand. Because the brain inside your head makes a mistake with its body map. Remember that word, body map? It's going to be an important word tonight. And even we can push this very far. So scientists have developed this 3D goggles. And if you then look at your own body, you see not your own body, but you see a Barbie doll, a little Barbie doll. And if they pinch your toes and at the same time pinch, and you see the toes of the little Barbie doll are pinched, then you feel your feelings inside the little Barbie doll and not in your real toes. So, second reason, we do not feel our feelings by the processes where their feelings are located. So when we feel something in our hand, it's our brain inside our head that produces the feeling. And if it goes for the hand, it goes the same for if you feel something in your heart, it's produced by the brain in your head. Your heart may signal something, but it doesn't have to, and we'll see that tonight. And the same, if you feel something in your gut, the feeling is produced inside your head, inside the brain, inside your head. Third reason, this is very easily knowable. If we damage the brain inside your head, then your feelings change. If we damage the limbic system and stuff like that, then you can't even feel emotions anymore. But if we damage your gut And we can damage your heart, but if we damage it too much, your heart, then of course you die. So it's important. But the gut can have quite a lot of damage, and it doesn't matter. And so, for instance, my mother had colon cancer, and they took out a big chunk of her gut, including all the brain cells that were there located, or neurons. I should not call it brain cells. That is already misleading hypnotic language patterns that these people that push this idea of gut and heart intelligence are trying to push onto you. So I should refuse to say that. So the neurons in that piece of big chunk of gut that got removed, they are gone, they are dead, they are outside of the body, no longer connected. It doesn't have zero impact on her feelings. If you would take out the same piece out of her brain in the right area, the limbic system, amygdala, then immediately it would have an impact on the feelings, even if those feelings are felt in the gut or in the heart. So 3 strong reasons why it's complete nonsense. And if people claim it's scientific, it's pseudoscience. Because for pseudoscience, we have 2 criteria. 1, it is not science. Well, establish that. And 2, important proponents pretend that it is scientific. So without further ado, let's delve into it. Let's go to this article by one of the major proponents, Wilbert Molenaar, a Dutch guy, I think, about the neuroscience and the 3 brains of leadership. So here we go. Recent neuroscience findings have uncovered that we have complex and functional neural networks, or brains, in our heart and gut. Well, except for the word brains, it's correct. We have found complex and functional neural networks in the gut and in the heart. But calling this brains is, of course, a step too far. It's not a brain at all. It is basically, but exactly what it says, a complex and functional neural network. And then the sentence continues, giving scientific credence to the growing body of leadership literature showing how the world's best companies are guided by leaders. Let me scroll. Who can tap into the intelligence of their heart and guts. And this is, of course, complete pseudoscience. There is zero scientific credence. And you can already hear this because they say a growing body of leadership literature. What do they mean when they say a growing body of leadership literature? It means that there's very little, but there is more than there used to be. And this is correct, of course, because these brain intelligence people have only started now to write. But the body of leadership literature that they're referring to is their own writings, is not scientific at all. And so the fact that there's neuroscience telling something about neurons in the heart and the gut has zero to do with what they claim here. And because they try to make this link, it becomes pseudoscience. Combining these neuroscience findings with the behavioral modeling research conducted by the authors, a number of key insights have been found about the roles of the heart and gut brains for adaptive and generative leadership. It's complete bullshit. Again, they say combining neuroscience with whatever we fantasized, because behavioral modeling research conducted by the authors is, of course, not scientific at all. If it would have been scientific, they would actually have quoted this relevant papers. There are no relevant scientific papers on this. This is just the bullshit they made up themselves. But they thought if we say combining this neuroscience with the bullshit we came up ourselves, that would probably sell a bit less. So they call it the behavioral modeling research conducted by the authors. But of course, that is a lack of referential index, and it actually refers to their own writings and not science at all. So let's skip a bit, because this is just all about marketing themselves. And let's skip to there where we find something that is actually of interest, and that is here. And again, if you have questions, if you have remarks, if you think that you disagree with me, again, many people disagree with me, you're more than welcome to disagree. I want to hear from you. Please put it in the chat, and then I can slow down, or make the point in different ways if need be. So let me know if there are questions or remarks. So here it becomes very interesting. We have skipped the marketing part of the article. Neuroscience and the cardiac and enteric brains. Again, brains, it is good that they put it in scare quotes. And so they are all already agreeing with me that they are not brains at all, because otherwise they would not say these scare quotes. But of course they use brains, because if they say that it is only a functional network, then everything else that they say falls apart. So even though they use the scare quotes, they hope you don't notice these scare quotes and that you will think of them as real brains. But of course, in reality, these are functional networks rather than brains. Over the last decade or so, the field of neuroscience has uncovered some intriguing findings that give support to the ideas that true leaders use all of the intelligence available to them and go well beyond what is just their head brain. Again, this is of course hypnotic language patterns. The field of neuroscience has assuredly uncovered some intriguing findings, but it is not clearly at all whether they give support to the idea that true leaders, fake leaders don't do it at all. But true leaders, if you want to be a true leader, you have to buy their stuff. So this is not saying anything at all. This is just more marketing. But here we get the interesting part. Starting with the pioneer research on neurocardiology, Dr. J. Andrew Armour introduced the concept of a functional brain in the heart. Well, actually, he did not use it as a functional brain because, hey, we lost the scare quotes. The article has been using the scare quotes from now on, but suddenly they are gone. His work revealed that the heart has a complex intrinsic neural network. Exactly, which is not a brain. And he did not use the brain as a word. Sufficiently sophisticated to qualify as a brain in its own right. Again, now the scare quotes are back again, and that literally means that they put it in quotes, that it's not literally a brain, even though they think it's qualifying it. The heart's neural network meets all the criteria specified for a brain, including several types of neurons, motor neurons, sensory neurons, interneurons, neurotransmitters, proteins, support cells. Yes, but we can also say that it simply doesn't have enough of that to actually support the idea that it's the brain. It's complex and elaborate neural circuitry allows the heart brain to function independently of the head brain, and it can learn, remember, feel, and sense. So here we can see that half of it is correct and the other half is pseudoscience. So it is complex and elaborate neural circuitry. That's the whole reason why we don't call it a brain. It's circuitry. And again, here, the heart brain, the scare quotes have suddenly disappeared. So you should notice stuff like that, because that's how pseudoscientific writers give their game away. And to function independently of the head brain, that's correct, because it's very important that the heart continue to work even if the brain is confused, because the heart is such a vital organ. And that's the reason why if you cut off the head of a chicken, the headless chicken can still run around for some time, because its heart is also independently working of the head brain. And indeed, the heart cells, they can learn. That is one of the important things that neurons do. Neurons can learn. Neurons can learn how to send messages to other neurons. And they remember how to send messages to other neurons. But here is the first sneaky pseudoscientific trick that is being used, because remember here is an unspecified verb. So what is being remembered is how data should be transported within these heart neurons, within remembering. I was also lost. And this is a completely different remembering than what we normally in normal human speak use as memories. These are not visual memories. These are not the memory of how something tastes or how something smells. These are memories of how to transport data within the circuitry from point A to point B. That has nothing to do with what we call our memories. So that is just, and they, how do you say, on purpose use this ambiguity to make you think that the heart remembers episodes that you had in your past. It remembers whether it should, how you say, in certain conditions, pump more blood or try to get more oxygen into the system, but it doesn't remember whether you met Paul or whether you had chicken for dinner or whether there was candlelight with the dinner. And it certainly does not feel or sense. Again, there is a sense of the word sense, in that you can say, yeah, but the heart cells notice if there's a difference in blood pressure, if the heart needs to pump a bit quicker, if there needs more oxygen. So that's the word, the way they use sense. But it's completely different in the way that we use our sense, in the sense that you can sense what I'm saying, sense what you see, what you feel, what you hear and taste. And it certainly cannot feel. So in order to visualize stuff, feel stuff, or have auditory auditory experiences, it actually needs cortexes. These are way bigger than what's happening in the heart. And those are the real meanings of what is being said by the scientist. And by using ambiguities, the people who propose the multi-brain stuff are actually creating pseudoscience. Following in 1998, neurobiologist and MD Dr. Michael Curson published his pivotal book, The Second Brain, in which he described the communication of a decade of research and discovery that the gut also contains a complex and fully functional neural network or brain. Again, here are the scare quotes again. The gut brain, without scare quotes, also known as the enteric brain, contains over 500 million neurons and sends and receives nerve signals throughout the chest and torso and intravenous organs as diverse as the pancreas, lungs, diaphragm, and liver. Yes, that's all correct. The gut brain, again, they call it brain, but suddenly the scare quotes are missing, is a vast chemical and neurohormonal warehouse and utilizes every class of neurotransmitter found in the head brain. Correct. Research has shown that the gut brain can learn, store memories, and perform complex independent processing. All correct. But again, here you have to understand what is meant by the word to learn, to store memories, and perform complex independent processing. The complex and independent processing is actually just digesting your food. Digesting your food is a very complex process, and it needs a lot of neurons to actually be done correctly. If it learns something, yes, it learns how to deal with certain foods, certain things happening in the gut, and it stores memories of what has happened to the gut before, but it doesn't store memories in the sense that you know where you went to school or what books you've read. That is all in the head brain and nowhere near the circuitry in the gut. The significance of these findings to leadership development is profound. Again, it is an empty sentence, basically a marketing sentence. It should not be in any text that tries to clarify stuff. And now, so we have already seen that in their description of what has been discovered, they have been quite close to what actually has happened, but they haven't put an interpretation on what has happened that is completely different from reality. Hence the pseudoscience. But now we get even worse, because now they're going to step away from the actually neuroscience, and now they're going just full out fantasy world, going to make up shit as they go along. Modeling the competencies and functions of the heart and gut brains. Again, see how they lost the scare quotes? Suddenly the scare quotes are gone. And these are all little tricks that people try to convince you of pseudoscientific bullshit. Over the last 3 years, informed by these neuroscience findings, we have performed behavioral modeling research on how the heart and gut brain functions in the practical areas of decision-making, action-taking, intuition, relationships, health and well-being, and personal fulfillment. Basically, anything you want, it will be taken care of your heart and gut. Along with this action research, again, this is just the stuff they make up. They call it research, but of course, no such research has been published in any scientific article, nor is any of this research actually linked or quoted or whatsoever. It's just whatever they made up and they called it research. Along with this action research, further analysis of evidence from a wide body of divergent sources, meaning we make up shit from anything we come across, has shown that the heart and gut brains are involved in representing and processing very specific forms of intelligence and intuitive functions. Again, we're not going to name them because we want to have a hypnotic language pattern to make it sound as convincing as astrology. And that is also, of course, the level of quality of the whole multi-brain interpretation this way. Again, there are neurons in the gut and the heart. They just don't do anything near what these people are describing. These findings support commonly held notions such as trusting one's gut instinct and being true to your heart. Again, this is also what happens a lot, is that they're now going to come up with why are we saying stuff like that? Well, actually, it is because of how our body works. But this is, of course, bullshit. As we will see, this is just them trying to convince you that there's really something in this bullshit. They also back up the assertion that whole leaders, again, we had already true leaders, now we have whole leaders. Again, these little words as true and whole, they create presupposition of adverbs and adjectives, and they are meant so that you are focusing on those words true and whole, and then you accept the rest of the sentence as a statement of fact or a truth. Where in reality, of course, we refuse to do it. When we come across presuppositions, our reaction is always, this is highly unlikely. And this is all highly unlikely because it's pseudoscientific bullshit. And they also back up the assertions that all leaders need to use not only their heads, but also the innate intelligence and wisdom. Oh, we're not only intelligent, but also wisdom of both their heart and gut. We have documented both the neuroscience findings and our subsequent modeling research in our recently published book, Embraining, but not in a scientific paper, we might add. Of course, here there's the suggestion that that there's also the possibility that you will not use their heart and the gut. And here we have reason number 4 why this is all bullshit, because you cannot stop your neurons in your heart from working, and you cannot stop the neurons in your gut from working. So even if you try really hard, you say, heart, neurons, stop feeling, stop doing anything, stop. They ignore you. So here the suggestion that there are 2 kinds of leaders, the whole and true leaders, and the partial and fake leaders, and that the whole and true leaders use all intelligence in their body, suggests that the partial and fake leaders only use their head. But of course, this is bullshit. This is basically complete impossible. It's complete impossible to stop the neurons in your heart and your gut from working. They will work whether you think of them as brains or whether you think them as neural circuitry, whether you know about it or not. They simply will do their work, and there is no difference in the way the whole true leaders use their gut and heart and in the way the partial and fake leaders, again, according to these authors, use their gut and the neurons in their gut and their heart. It is basically exactly the same because you have no control over what these neurons are doing. These findings indicate that there are 3 core prime functions of each of the 3 neural networks or brains. Oh, we're back to scare quotes. The heart-brain prime function, now the scare quotes are gone again. Emoting, emotional processing, anger, grief, hatred, joy, and happiness makes absolute no sense whatsoever. I explained it. The emotional process, anger, grief, hatred, joy, and happiness are all conscious experiences. There is simply not a scientist in the world who would even suggest that the heart produces anything consciousness. So this is complete bullshit. Values, again, well, we can even discuss whether there are values in the brain. Values processing what's important to you and your priorities, and its relationship to the emotional strength of your aspirations, dream, desires. It sounds all very nice, but so does astrology. And this is, of course, purely astrological writings. It must be true, otherwise we wouldn't hold notions as one gut instinct. What kind of drogreden is it called in Dutch? Yes, so that is indeed a drogreden, as we say in Dutch. Yeah, it is. This is what they try to do. They say, well, the heart is basically, well, what are the kind of cliches that are connected to our heart? Oh, the heart is about feelings, about value, about relations. Oh, that's the reason why we use our heart. But this is, of course, complete bullshit. This is, their research is, okay, this is how people talk about their heart, but there is absolutely not a single idea of how this connects to the neuroscience. And the word drogreden in English is fallacy. So it's a complete fallacy to think that the way we speak about something is also how the underlying reality is. Of course, it is exactly the opposite. It is highly likely that the underlying reality is exactly different from how we speak in our language, or how we talk about stuff. So you're absolutely right, Faculties Image, and good to see you. There's also real science on the effect of gut microbiome on behavior. Absolutely. So let me make this clear. There is a lot of stuff that, so the brain inside our head needs a lot of input from the body. Nevertheless, if you look at emotions, there's a neuroscientist called Damasio, and he has quite a good grasp on how emotions are produced in the brain inside our head. And what they use is something called a body map. So in order to know where to feel something, whether you feel it in your heart or in your gut, or the rubbing on your hand, what happens inside the brain is that there's literally on several different modules within the brain, there are body maps, which is kind of a small 3D figurine of your own body. And then the body map is hit with waves of input from the neurons, and then you actually notice what's happening in the body. And that's why the rubber hand illusion works, because now we fool the brain in creating the wrong body map. And that's also how I say pains in limbs that are no longer phantom pains. I was looking for the right sentence. So that's the reason why phantom pains exist, because then the pain is projected by the brain inside our head into a limb that no longer exists. And it is, if we can live without a heart, if there becomes any time, well, here's a good thing. People with an artificial heart, they have the same emotions as people without artificial hearts. Oh, there we have a complete fact that completely destroys this whole embraining stuff. Because now the neurons in our heart are gone. There is just a machine inside our heart. It's a complete mechanical machine being run by chips. And these chips, we know of that they don't have emotions, values, of relational effect. So indeed, but that doesn't mean that the body sends signals toward our brain, and our brain uses those signals to come up with all kinds of feelings, and then produces those feelings on those body maps. That's exactly what happens when we rub our hand. Our hand is sending the signal to our brain. Our brain processes and says, okay, we need to produce a feeling. And where do we produce the feeling? Okay, let's look in the body map. Ah, there's the hand. And if it's a rubber hand, it's the wrong hand. But it is the right hand according to the body map. And then you will feel that in the rubber hand. And again, microbiome is all of influence of our behavior, because that's the signals that are coming to the brain inside our head. So yes, there is a lot of going on, and again, it is also not a passive receiving of information by the brain, because the brain can also send out data packages to the heart and to the gut, informing of wanted to be more informed or have more or less data coming in. But it's all processed by the brain, and the heart neurons and the gut neurons have a lot of tasks they do independently of the brain, but emoting values and relational affect are none of it. Is that more interesting? Well, I don't know. Could very well be. I don't know. Yes, so you might say. That's highly likely that the way our body works has an influence on how the brain inside our head feels, uses emotions, values, and relational affect. But it's all the brain inside our head processing data and coming from the body, the whole body, including the gut and the heart, but also many other organs and parts of the body. So again, in values, we know very well how values work inside the brain, because there are no values in the brain. What actually is happening is called positive reinforcement. So you actually value that what has been positive reinforced in the past. If you have positive consequences for certain behaviors, then you really like those behaviors because it gives you what you want. And that is why you value these behaviors, and you can then abstract from the behavior and create a value. And so we know that for values, the dopamine reward system of the brain inside our head is necessary, and that is all lacking in the gut and in the heart. And you feel connections with others. Again, we're feeling something. If you feel something, it's a conscious experience. There's absolutely not a single scientist who claims that the heart or the gut produces consciousness. Only the brain inside our head can produce consciousness. Again, this here. We know that you can put people under narcosis. What do? We put stuff inside their body. It will move towards the brain, and then the brain shuts off consciousness. But again, during narcosis, the heart and the gut is still working as it is always working. It doesn't change how the gut and the heart are working, the neurons that are working in the gut and the heart. Meaning that if you think that the heart would produce emotions, values, and relational affect, then you should be able to feel that, to be conscious of all of that during narcosis. We know this is bullshit because this is all pseudoscientific bullshit. And again, this is all basically the fallacy that Faculties pointed out. The fact that we talk about this stuff is why their behavioral research has shown that this is really the case. But again, they have just turned cliches into pseudoscience. So the gut is for core identity, a deep and visceral sense of core self, and determining the deepest level what's a self versus not self. Of course, we know that there is in the brain inside our head, there is a very clear area which is producing the idea that we are a person, that we are an agent. There is a very, sincere psychiatric illness. I don't like the word illness, but at least a malfunction of the brain. It's called depersonalization problems. That is when the person starts to lose the idea that he is an I and a person. It's a very, I have worked with 3 of them, or 4 maybe even. And that is a very severe malfunctioning of the brain. In the head, again, you don't get depersonalization problems if there's something wrong in the gut. You get them when there is something wrong going in the brain inside your head. Self-preservation, protection of self, safety, boundaries, hungers, and aversions. Of course, here we have hunger. That is, if there's one feeling that should be connected to the gut, it is hunger, right? Because, and I know this because I eat too much, and my gut is always telling me, Joost, the gut is empty, put more in, put more in, put more in. Of course, this is complete made up bullshit by myself, because in reality what happens is that the gut indeed signals to the brain in the head, hey, there's room for more, and then the brain inside my head turns it into hunger, because hunger is a conscious experience. The only place inside our body that produces consciousness is the brain inside our head. Mobilization, mobility, impulse for action, gutsy courage, and the will to act. Again, I'm just going to, I hope by now that you understand that a lot of all the courage and stuff like that and the will to act is just very abstract talk about this function that's actually located inside the brain, in the head. But of course the gut, but more even the neurons within the spinal cord. And they're not talking about those at all. So there are also a lot of neurons in the spinal cord, because that's how the information is actually transported to the brain inside the head. Can you explain a bit better what the depersonalization means? What do these people actually think they are if they are not a person? Yes, this is a very difficult concept to grasp. A good question, Patoon. Nice to see you. I had not said hello to you yet. So indeed, what do they experience? And they find it very difficult to talk about it. I had actually one person who had an acute attack of depersonalization in one of my training programs. First of all, let me just state, if you know people who experience it, or if you have to deal with it or yourself, fight against it. A lot of stupid NLP trainers then tell persons who experience depersonalization that they have to go through it, that it is part of the process, that they should trust the process. That's all really, really bad, because it strengthens the process of depersonalization. And you should instead fight, make sure you get back into your body, that you get back that sense of the self that we're talking about. But again, even though you need to go back into your body and getting a sense of yourself, that is all produced by an area in the brain that is well known and that is known to be disturbed when people experience it. So yeah, we as persons, we see ourselves as persons. It's very difficult to think what is happening to these persons. So the way they describe it is that they say, well, I feel that I'm fading away. I am dissolving into reality, and the only thing that's left over is this object. So it's no longer a person. So it's basically, but again, I don't have these experiences, so it's very hard for me to talk about it. And they can't talk about it because the moment they say I experience this, then the problem of depersonalization is gone. So they find it very hard to put it into words either. So let's try an analogy that is much easier to describe. So most people also have the idea that they have a free will. Well, this is highly unlikely. There's a research by Libet, for instance, that can show that the brain, the unconscious brain, has already come up with decisions way before you become consciously aware of it, and it could be even 8 seconds before that. It seems that their consciousness has some kind of veto power, but again, that could also be different parts of the unconscious mind. So we, even though we feel that we have free will, that's highly unlikely, and we know that the brain is coming up with all these kinds of illusions. For instance, the illusion that you have a free will. Most people have a lay person's idea of how physics works and how biology works, and how psychology works, and we know all of these to be false. So these are all illusions that the brain creates in order to make sure that we survive, that we actually can function within a society, and being a person is also an illusion created by the brain. In fact, you're just a meat bag. Just a talking, walking meat bag. But that's very difficult to see ourselves in. And it's also very unhealthy. So these are very healthy illusions to have. So yeah, how does it feel when these illusions fall away? Well, if you have ever experienced something very dramatic, something very bad in your life, which followed bad decision making of your own, and then you feel the impossibility of reversing time. You just say, oh, I wish I shouldn't have done that. Oh, I'm so stupid. How could I have done this? I wish I could do it again. And then you're confronted with the irreversibility of time. And that's kind of having the illusion of free will fall away, because now you can no longer change what you want to change with your free will. A depersonalization should be something like that, but then not with free will, but the idea that you're a person. So hopefully that explains it a little bit better, but of course I'm trying to put into words, which is very difficult. So here the head is presented as if it's very logical, thinking, meaning making, conception. So cognition, perception, pattern recognition, sure, it's all in the head, we agree. Thinking, reasoning, abstraction, analysis, synthesis, metacognition, sure, it's all in the head, we agree. Making meaning, semantic process, language, narrative, metaphors. Well, actually, that's not in the head, although most scientists would put it in the head. But for those people who know my triangulation model based on the work of Donald Davidson, they know that I put the making of meaning within society, and well, only what's inside your head, but again, it's in the brain inside your head, is a code that helps you use the meaning created within society. So here, and this is also that is again the fallacy that Vakasimic pointed out, is the idea that because we talk about it in a way that it should be how reality is. This is of course not the case at all. And so what is presented here is that brain, the head is rational, it's logical, it's our thinking thing. The heart is, this is our love. We love each other. I'm going to give you my heart. Oh, I lost my heart in you. Oh, this is love, 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 love. And the gut is then, this is my gut reaction, my intuition, which of course is all complete bullshit. All three of them are actually part of our brain inside our head and not the gut or the heart. Clearly, each of the brains has a fundamentally different form of intelligence. No, that's not clear at all. In fact, it is clear that it's the opposite. This is just complete bullshit and has different goals operating under different criteria. Again, this is formulated so broadly that it is hypnotic languaging and not clarifying at all. But it's, again, the opposite is actually clear. In other words, the head, heart, and gut have different ways of processing the world with different concerns and domains of competence. Of course, this is all correct in a narrow sense, where you say, okay, the heart is processing the world in terms of oxygen, blood pressure, and stuff like that, and has a concern of helping the heart pump blood, and it has a domain of competence of pumping blood. And that is, of course, different than the gut, because the gut processes the world as in form of food, and it is concerned with getting the right nutrients from the food and getting away of waste, and it's in different competence. So in the narrow sense, this is correct, but of course, they want you to believe it in the broad sense, as if it includes all functions that are actually into the brain in the head. Hi, Sheila. Do you know any arguments which are used to defend having a free will? Yes, there are many arguments in favor of free will. I don't like them, except for one, and that is that there is, most of the time, it's presented as a binary choice between free will on the one hand and determinism on the other hand. And that is just a wrong picture. It is not a binary choice, but there's a whole spectrum of options. And on one hand, you have complete free will. On the other hand, there's absolute determinism. And there are many options in between. So that is one way of defending a free will. The other way is actually what is called compatibilism, is where you're going to show that the world, I don't like this at all, but then you can show that the world might be completely determined. But even that in a completely determined world, you still have a free will as long as you exactly choose that option, which is actually going to happen because of the hyperdetermination of everything. So as long as you're actually exactly choosing the right thing, that just happens to become, then you can actually have free will within a completely deterministic world. But I don't like that argument at all. The importance of this to you as a leader is twofold. First, it's crucial whenever making personal or group decisions that all three intelligences are accessed and incorporated into the decision-making process. Again, I have no problem with this. This is nothing wrong here. This is perfectly sensible to include how you feel about stuff, what your intuitions tell you, how your relationships are. All of this is great for leadership, for personal relations, for your own development. There's nothing wrong with those ideas. I'm not against those ideas at all. In fact, I am big in favor of those ideas. What is wrong all about this is that it is tied to the neurons that are found in the heart or in the gut. You don't need that relationship whatsoever. There is simply no single clue why we can't deal with all of this. Why don't we have all of this if we only use the brain in our head? We're not missing out on anything. We can have completely anything that they describe here, all by the brain inside our head. And they basically think that the brain inside your head is just this very stupid, backwards working, only doing logic processing part. And that is just so pseudoscientific nonsense. Everything they want from the heart and the gut neurons is actually produced and can be produced and is sufficiently produced and necessarily produced by the brain inside our head. It doesn't add anything that to say that it's connected to the neurons in your heart or in your gut. We get all of these good things, even though we are going to leave the heart and gut neurons doing what they do best, which is pumping blood and digesting food. And so whatever is coming now, so the idea, without the heart intelligence, there will not be sufficient value-driven emotional energy to care about to act on or prioritize the decision against competing pressures. Well, it sounds all great, but it's our head, the brain inside our head, that is doing that. It has nothing to do with the neurons in our heart. Without the gut intelligence, there will not be sufficient attention to managing risk, nor enough willpower to mobilize and execute decisions once challenges arises. I can all agree with it, but it has nothing to do with the neurons in our gut. It has to do with the neurons inside our head. And so, well, it's a very long article, so they're just going to continue to list all the good things that the gut and the heart are doing. But again, there is simply no evidence whatsoever that what they are claiming is actually being done by the gut and the heart. And it can perfectly be done by the neurons inside our head and is actually done by the neurons inside our head. And there's a lot of scientific evidence that is the case. So I can go on and on and on. But again, this is all promotion of their own work. So I don't see anything else that is of interest. So to sum up, there are 4 reasons why the idea of multiple brains is nonsense. First, we have Tononi. There is simply not enough data integration within the heart or in the gut to create consciousness. And as they describe that, we have seen that in the article, they describe all kinds of conscious experiences. And it's simply complete pseudoscientific bullshit to suggest that consciousness is produced by either the heart or the gut, or both. The second reason is, well, actually, when you feel something, we already know that this needs to, in order to feel something consciously, we need body maps. Body maps are only found in the neurons inside our head. There are no body maps inside our heart or in our gut. Third, we know that if we damage the brain, if there are lesions in the limbic system or the amygdala, that it immediately impacts the way our emotions are processed. We either feel nothing anymore or we feel completely different emotions, whereas damage to our heart and damage to our gut doesn't impact us at all. Of course, it impacts us, but it is, again, this is how the brain processes the information from the body. It's not processed in the body. Well, consciousness is, of course, the biggest mystery of the second biggest mystery within the universe, because we're completely unclear of how the brain produces, and the brain inside our head produces consciousness. But Tononi has very interesting research, neuroscientific research, showing that you can measure how fast data is moved from one part of the network to another part of the network. And our brain inside our head has a very high level of data integration. And they actually now use Tononi's information integration theory to measure whether someone is in a coma and is not conscious, because then you can see that the data integration inside the brain drops below a threshold. And and locked-in body syndrome, where people appear to be comatic, but are actually consciously aware inside their head. They just can't move their body anymore. And they now can see by making brain scans, okay, this is a person with very low data integration, so this is a coma. This is a person with high data integration, so it's likely to be locked-in body syndrome. And then they can actually start to communicate with those people, either through blinking of the eyes, because often the eyes blinks can still be used by people with locked-in body syndrome, or by actually training them with cursor movement, by scanning their brain and having them activate different parts in the brain. And then they can check whether they feel okay. So we do not know what conscious is or how it is produced, but we now do have a measure to estimate whether a network is capable of consciousness or not. And of course, if you take the gut, we have about 20 to 30 meters of gut, and it is all lined up with all neurons. So the neurons are extremely separated from each other compared to the neurons inside the brain in our head, especially the old brain. So we have about 150 billion brain cells inside our head, but about 100 of those brain cells, 100 billion brain cells, are actually in what is called the old brain, which is a relatively small part of the brain, but it is very, very dense, full with neurons. And this is completely different picture than if you were to stretch the whole gut out, and you have signals that have to travel over 20 meters or 30 meters, depending on whether you're vegetarian or not. Meat eaters have a shorter gut than vegetarians, which should suggest that vegetarians have more gut intelligence than meat eaters. Of course, vegetarians would probably agree, but I think meat eaters disagree. So you get in all kind of this nonsense as soon as you think that the neurons inside your gut or your heart actually produce consciousness. So we don't know what conscious is or how the brain produces consciousness, but we do have a measure called data integration. Now, Tononi calls it information integration, but that's just, we talked about the difference between data and information in other streams. So I say it's data integration. The data integration within the gut and within the heart is just way too low to have consciousness. And that means that all conscious experience attributed to the heart or the gut is just complete nonsense. It's pseudoscientific bullshit. It's just all happening within the brain inside our head. And the fourth reason, what was the fourth reason? Oh, body maps. Did I already mention body maps? I'm not sure. Okay, so we have to rewatch this stream to check. But there are 4 reasons, but I might have forgotten about one of them at the end of the stream. So just rewatch them, check them. I think we did damage. So damage is one reason. The feeling projection is the second reason. Third reason is data integration. I think fourth reason is body maps. So given that there are no body maps inside the gut and in the heart, it simply means that whatever they think that the gut or heart is doing is simply nonsense, pseudoscientific nonsense. Any questions? We are at the end of the hour. Let me know if there's any question, remark. I'm more than happy to answer them. If not, thank you for watching. Tomorrow we will do Nietzsche. And Nietzsche, we're going to show how Nietzsche, tomorrow between 7 and 8, we are going to see how Nietzsche, already 100 years before Richard Bandler developed neuro-linguistic programming, actually had the same kind of ideas, the same way of phrasing it. And I always call Nietzsche a proto-neuro-linguistic programmer. He had very much the same ideas, even though if I ask Richard Bandler about it, he always tells me Nietzsche is dead, which is correct. There is still one question. Maybe the author forgot to subscribe to some scientific journals. I don't know. This is all typical how neuroscience is abused by people who want to use neuroscience to actually, come across as scientific without doing actually any science at all, actually creating pseudoscience. So We don't know. Thanks for the stream. Looking forward to tomorrow. Great. Well, it's great having you. So if there are no other questions, then we're done for today. Bye, 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 bye. Patoon, thank you for the presentation. Well, you're welcome. All right. Thanks and bye, bye, bye.